government cover-ups. You want answers? Well, so does he. He's Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network. And now, live from Austin, Texas, Alex Jones.
Well, we're not going to be covering Miley Cyrus and her mystery date that turned out to be a wanted man today. I'm sorry. We're going to be talking about the headline, Russian troops invade Ukraine. Breach of border, again, fighting alongside rebels, assault intensifies. That's the headline on DrudgeReport.com from Reuters, Bloomberg, the Washington Post, you name it. We also have the reports up on Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. Here's the bottom line. Russia has been in Ukraine since this all started earlier this year when the Ukrainian government and the people voted to not join the EU. When the West basically overthrew the government in a coup, an unelected coup that Obama called elected, Russia came in and secured areas that were historically part of Russia. I'm not defending Russia, that's just a fact. They act a lot less colonial and expansionist than the Goldman Sachs does running our country. They're not messing with my interest. They're not trying to take my liberties like the globalists are. But since that happened, they've put proxy troops in. They've put advisors in. There's been a propaganda war with the shoot down of the Malaysian aircraft. Who knows the truth on that? But there have been CIA and NATO advisors with the Ukrainian troops the entire time trying to take over ethnically Russian areas on the Russian border inside eastern Ukraine. That's what's going on. Now, that said, when you hear big announcements of, oh my gosh, Russia has invaded, we heard this 2 weeks ago that supposedly a Russian column of armored vehicles got blown up. Remember that? In fact, will you guys reprint me that? Thank you. They never retracted it, but it turned out there was no video. It didn't happen. Remember in 2008 when the Olympics kicked off, we were told, I woke up and saw CNN. And they announced Russia has invaded Georgia. Russia has invaded Georgia. And I remember going on air hours later and saying Russia has invaded Georgia in an insane move. Of course, hours later, I was reading Foreign Press, and it was after Georgian forces attacked South Ossetia and Abkhazia, killing the entire garrisons of Russian troops that had been there since the end of World War II in Russian ethnic areas in that zone, and that they had attacked, and the Russians had come in to drive them out and said, we're going to go all the way to the capital of Georgia if you don't stop attacking us, and if NATO doesn't pull out with U.S. and other mercenaries. And then NATO pulled out and Russia pulled out. Kiev says forces destroyed Russian armor inside Ukraine. Remember that back on August 15th, almost 2 weeks ago. We just keep hearing this, but the media is running with the headline, the New York Times and others, that Russian troops have invaded. Russian troops have invaded. There it is, London Guardian. Ukraine troops battled Russian armor column, claims Kiev. Russia plays down hopes for breakthrough as Minsk talks, as tensions rise with plans to send second aid convoy into Ukraine. And the Russians have released video that it's aid convoys. Then they say, well, they're painting military vehicles white. Well, that's the oldest trick in the book. I don't know what the truth is, but they've been caught lying so many times that I don't trust NATO and the New World Order 1 micron. And this is a Russian interest in that area. Well, the president of Ukraine has announced that Russian troops have invaded the country. And satellite photos are now being released. NATO released a series of satellite images on Thursday showing that a top general described as Russian combat soldiers equipped with sophisticated heavy weaponry are operating inside Ukraine's sovereign territory. According to a statement posted on the NATO website, the photos confirm that NATO and its allies had been seeing for weeks from other sources. This is a direct contradiction of recent statements made by Kremlin officials that a pro-Russian separatist leader in Ukraine who said all the Russian troops that had entered the country are on their vacations and assisting the separatists on a volunteer basis. Let's stop right there. I have no doubt that Russian troops have been in there for years. There's a whole bunch of naval and Russian army bases in Ukraine. It's been part of Russia for hundreds of years. I'm not on Russia's side here, and I'm not on Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan that run our country's side or NATO's side. These are two different predatory power blocks fighting with each other. But the West did overthrow the elected Ukrainian government earlier this year and installed an unelected one that Obama called elected. They've since had elections that Russia didn't dispute too much, and the new president is saying Russia has invaded. Well, it's admitted that the CIA and NATO are in there bringing arms and weapons and advisors as well. So let's get this straight. There's a Cold War going on, just like from 1959 to 1964 when the Vietnam War officially got going with the Gulf of Tonkin staged event. There was officially a staged event that got us into that, not declassified for 40 years. But nevertheless, from the time that China fell, from the time that the French pulled out of Vietnam in '59 and Eisenhower secretly sent about 30,000, quote, advisors in, they were coming home every day in pine boxes, sometimes dozens a day in pine boxes. I know people. I have family that was in Vietnam in 1960. That's been declassified. So it's the same thing. You've got U.S. forces, mercenaries, NATO forces. It's come out in the foreign news battling Russian troops in eastern Ukraine. So, yes, that's true. It's probably going on. They announced 2 weeks ago, or almost 2 weeks ago on the 15th of August, that they destroyed a Russian armored convoy of armored vehicles and tanks. They showed no video. Later, they showed a few white vehicles burning that the Russians said were aid vehicles. I'm sure the Russians are smuggling weapons in. I think both sides are lying here. But whose backyard is it? Who started it? Who overthrew Ukraine? George Soros bragged. Just type in George Soros takes credit for Ukraine overthrow. This is a guy that wants our guns. This is a guy that wants to end our free speech. This is a guy trying to finance open borders here. It's the same globalists that want destabilization worldwide. There's the headline. Soros admits responsibility for coup and mass murder in Ukraine. Color Revolution collaboration began soon after engineered fall of Soviet Union. And it's now coming to a head. $5 billion spent in Ukraine to destabilize it. If they were really trying to bring the Second Amendment and freedom and not trying to take over the Ukraine so the EU bankers, the same ones that control our country, could literally suck that nation dry, and if Ukrainians really wanted the Russians completely out, I'd be all for it. But half of Ukraine has always been traditionally Russian. It's over 90+% Russian in areas close to the Russian border. Overall, you can look up these numbers, these demographics, 75% of eastern Ukraine is Russian. And they've been there for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. It's been part of Russia scores of times. This would be like Mexico being UN-backed, taking back Texas and saying, well, we had it, 180 years ago. And then Texans start fighting back, and it's on the news. Texans have invaded Texas. Saying Russians have invaded areas of eastern Ukraine is like saying Texans have invaded Texas. It just has no bearing in reality. It'd be like saying Comanches have invaded Oklahoma or Indiana. It'd be like saying Vikings have invaded Norway. It'd be like saying the Dallas Cowboys have invaded Dallas. The Seattle Seahawks have invaded Seattle. Germans have invaded Germany. Iraqis have invaded Iraq. No, the globalists are manipulating all countries off against each other to sell weapons, consolidate control. They turned radical Islamicist, run by Saudi Arabia, financed by the West, Turkey, you name it, loose on our allies like Hosni Mubarak in Egypt, loose on people trying to work with the West like Muammar Gaddafi, loose on Syria, loose on Iraq, loose on the contractors and workers there trying to put in an infrastructure. I've watched these ISIS videos, Crossing of Swords and others, and I can't even watch the whole thing, where they pull families over on highways in Iraq and then just shoot them with high-powered machine guns, or walk up to utility workers trying to put in phone lines and blow them, kill them. and then pull up next to a guy going, your wife is not wearing black, she's wearing brown. I mean, it's just imagine living under these absolutely out-of-control Wahhabists who threaten us on a routine basis, by the way. Notice they're not attacking Israel. They're not attacking the CIA because, folks, they work for the group that is above the CIA, above Israel, above the European Union, above the Vatican, above all these power structures. It is chaos directed against humanity, almost like it's an alien force from a distant star system that's here posing as humans, manipulating us. It's that scientific, that cold-blooded, that evil. In fact, guys, I don't remember the exact headline for it, but we've reposted it. Star Trek exposes 9/11, I think's the video name. Or Star Trek exposes divide and conquers, what we called it when we posted it. It's like a 7-year-old video from YouTube. I want to play that later. It's an episode from Star Trek. I forget the name of the episode, but I'll find the name. We'll do a review of that. I'd have McBrain do a review of it. He likes Star Trek. I like Star Trek too. We both like it. It's so goofy. We like the original stuff with Captain Kirk, Liam Shatner, where there's an invisible alien on board the ship, and it's playing the Klingons and the humans off against each other to suck the energy and consolidate power over them. And I'm not saying it's a real alien doing this, but that's an allegory of what we're dealing with, and until we become aware of it, there's no future. I want to hear from military people out there, again, specifically contractors, corporate people, folks that have lived in Ukraine or Russia or Poland or surrounding areas. If you're in Europe or you were a contractor or military, give me your take on this. Because I get the cold-blooded chess. Cut Russia off. Don't let them send gas to Europe. Don't let them have a gas pipeline to China. Cut off the Black Sea. Put missile cruisers there. Call it missile defense when it's really a nuke shoot-down system so Russia can't respond if the West hits them first. The problem is Russia will launch on warning now because of these missiles being moved in. That's what Ray McGovern, who was Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush's favorite morning briefer and top CIA analyst. Very top for general geopolitical stuff. Combat vet, whole 9 yards. And he just said the entire community of people that aren't nihilist death wishers this is the most dangerous point the world's ever been in. And the globalists, the big banks, are busy manipulating and pushing the world towards crisis on every single front. And I'm completely upset about it and completely focused. I've been very serious this morning here at the office because you can feel the energy and the danger intensifying. Now, they tried to lie and say Russia had invaded Georgia back in 2008 on 8/88. In August of 2008. 6 years ago. The question is this another hoax where there are no Russian forces preemptively invading? I don't know. Are there Russians there in a proxy war? Absolutely. Looking after their gas pipelines, military and naval bases, and supply lines. That's Russia's main funding, is supplying cheap gas to Europe and cheap oil. On 8/88, it's on record. They have neocon, known CIA minions attack me routinely for this because I expose it and they hate it. That day I got up and went in at like 6 a.m. to look at the news, and the headline on CNN and everywhere else I turned on television was, Russia has invaded Georgia. And even 6 years ago, I was still naive. I guess I still am naive. Who knows what the next shoe to drop is. I was on air hours later at 11 and went on air and said, Russia has invaded Georgia. And then people started emailing us BBC articles and Der Spiegel articles and Russian news. And it was headline, President begs for help, says they've been hit, begs for NATO, who was already there. They attacked Ossetia, South Ossetia and Abkhazia, killing entire buildings full of Russian troops in a middle-of-the-night attack, killing everyone. And we're shelling and with tanks, and the Russians poured in across the border, drove them back and said, get out, NATO, we're going to attack you. And NATO pulled out, Russia pulled out a week later. So the West is trying to take Russian interest. Russia's pushing back. And again, I'm not saying they're angels or something. The point is, we don't have the moral high ground when our elites are directing the world towards this position. We'll be right back. Stay with us. I'm going to give out the toll-free number. If you're in Poland, if you're in Ukraine, if you're in Russia, if you're in Northern Europe that borders a lot of these areas as well. If there is a regional war, it's going to affect the economies big time, the stock markets, the energy prices. And then there is a very distinct possibility this could escalate into a full-out nuclear war. That's what Ray McGovern, former top CIA analyst to the presidents, has said on this show, and that's what every other major analyst says. This is a very reckless game. This is not North Korea. If our government started trying to topple North Korea, I'd say, wow, our government might actually be moral. No. The guy's a complete joke. But he's got over 100,000 pieces of artillery and would shell the South Korean city into the ground. But nobody is messing with North Korea. Instead, ladies and gentlemen, they're messing with Russia that is doing nothing to anybody. But hey, we had a 60-year Cold War with them. Doesn't matter, the very bankers that run our country. Let's say that again. The very bankers that run our country, the very bankers that run our country, that have hijacked it, are the ones that put the Bolsheviks in power in 1917. That's mainline congressional hearings in the 70s, the church committees, Anthony Sutton, declassified, Mao Zedong put in power by the Western elites. Look at how they're trying to shut off Russian gas pipelines and how they're trying to shut off our gas and oil pipelines into the United States of oil and gas we need. Look at how they're shutting down our train beds. Look at how they're shutting down our infrastructure. Look at how they're shutting down more than a third of our coal power plants. Look at how our power prices are going up. Look at all the regulations. You see, the globalists want to shut everything down they don't control and then sell you commodities at 100 times what they should be worth, just like diamonds. Diamonds are artificially scarce. They lay on the ground all over Africa. But the West controls Africa, so you can't get the diamonds out. And they have hundreds of movies and TV shows about anybody who doesn't put diamonds through the UN program is racist and has blacks as slaves at slave camps mining the diamonds. And there is some of that going on, but mainly it's villages and communities and countries that try to mine their own diamonds, and they get overthrown when they do. And there are literal slave camps run by the West, the equivalent of slave camps, where they do mine the diamonds, and then you will pay a year's salary to put a 2-carat diamond ring on your wife's finger. And you can tell a woman, hey, these things are worthless. It's a big scam from 100 years ago. The Oppenheimers and De Beers with Edward Bernays and the British royalty, who owns a big part of De Beers, ran the scam. There's documentaries on it. It's an admitted fact. And they'll say, I don't care. I want it. I gotta have it. People love frauds. People love scams. And they're cutting our oil off. They're cutting our gas off. They're teaching us 2 + 2 = 5. We've never been at war with Syria. We've always been at war with Syria. Now Syria's our best buddy. We are living 1984 with a bunch of globalist, existential envy haters of humanity. Haters gonna hate. Bill Gates, David Rockefeller, all of them are haters writ large. The biggest haters this world's ever seen. Hitler was a hater. Stalin was a hater. Mao was a hater. They want control. They want to dominate. They want to dumb down. That's my litmus test. Are the Russians brutish and thuggish and basically a kleptocracy mafia? Yes. And if they get in my business and try to take my guns or my property or my kids or try to forcibly inoculate me or try to push me around, I'll become the biggest Russian phobe you ever saw. But the Russians aren't doing jack squat in my backyard. The New World Order's, the same people screwing Russia over are the same people taking all my freedoms. George Soros, Bill Gates, Hillary Clinton, Samantha Powers. And you got the French government, you got the Russian government, fighting with each other. You got the Germans and the Russians fighting with each other. I mean, this is a disaster. So now, NATO just released satellite evidence. Russia is lying about invading Ukraine. And you can blow up some of the images. We have them on Infowars.com. It's from Business Insider. Doesn't look like any evidence I've ever seen. Pathetically vague. The guns are pointed north, directly towards Ukraine territory, the statement explained. Yeah, which way do you think our guns are pointed? At Russia? This is just ridiculous. So then you read the article, it's pointed into Ukraine. Tell me something I didn't know. They prey on people's military ignorance. When the West started all of this, what are the bankers thinking?
On the march.
If a major war breaks out between Russia and NATO, It will be raining nuclear fallout, not just blood. From a lacerated sky, bleeding its horror, draining our structure. Now I will rain blood. And I guess a lot of you love the spirit of Joseph Mengele out there, and you want to have a war with Russia. Russia doesn't teach their kids 2 + 2 = 5, or that Heather has 2 mommies. Russia promotes men and women getting married and having children and not reducing their population. The truth is, Russia has started to break away from the larger eugenics-based New World Order into a strongman nationalism that is brutish and ancient, but compared to the New World Order, would be preferable. That's all I'm saying. And the West started this. If you disagree with me, go ahead and call in. I think that it's a little bit of both. I think this is overall hype to get a larger escalation against the Russians, because using advisors with former Russian military that lives in Ukraine, they are beating the NATO, CIA, mercenary forces in the mainly Russian ethnic areas. So there is a major proxy war with Russia on their doorstep. We know that's going on. Did they blow up an armored column 2 weeks ago? Turned out that wasn't true. So you can't believe a word comes out of the elected president of Ukraine. Again, the first one they installed earlier this year was not elected in the NATO coup. So NATO's caused a coup trying to steal the Russian infrastructure, the Russian pipelines, the Russian bases. They're not putting up with it. And so the bankers, the John Corzine type people that make 40-to-1 bets with your private bank account money and don't get in trouble, that have gotten away with anything you can imagine, they think they can mess with Russia, just like Napoleon did, just like Hitler did. And even if you like Napoleon or Hitler, did it end well for them? Can you imagine if Russia had helped overthrow the Mexican government and was now claiming part of Texas belonged to them? How would you feel about that? That's what's happening, but they prey on people's ignorance. In fact, I knew it would happen. Now I'm hearing that Assad in the news is protecting ISIS, which is Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda in Syria, Al-Qaeda in Iraq merged to form ISIS and then IS. That's on record. Doesn't matter. They're saying, oh, we might have to take out Assad too, because he won't let us come in and take out ISIS, when ISIS was armed by the very same globalists. I mean, this is so evil. I want to hear from people that have lived in Ukraine, lived in Russia, or in Russia. I want to hear from contractors, U.S. military, people that have been stationed over there. What is your view? What is your angle on this? 800-259-9231. 800-259-9231. I guess to be patriotic, I should just support 2 + 2 = 5, and I should support Obamacare, because I'm not racist, and everything is awesome. I should just support Fast and Furious. I should support Solyndra. I should support Benghazi whitewashes. I should support everything. And I should support nuclear war with the Russians. I mean, prove you're patriotic today. Join the military. Go fight the Russians. Did the Russians create a $1.5 trillion, $1.5 quadrillion global debt of fake derivatives and sign us onto it? No. Did the globalists run Enron scams and Bernie Madoff scams? No. Did the globalists in the last 5 years worldwide, except for Russia and a few other countries, they don't do it there, put satellite tracker boxes to tax and trace you by the mile in all the cars, which they're saying they want to start next year in pilot cities, San Francisco, Austin, and Minneapolis, St. Paul, and New York, all the places that are liberal and trendy, where being a schmuck is cool. They're going to start taxing us by the mile next year, the Department of Transportation has announced. And you know what? It's Putin's fault. If I fall on a banana peel, or if I'm bouldering in the Grand Canyon or bouldering in Big Bend and slip and tear my Achilles, I don't say a cuss word under my breath. I say, Vladimir Putin. If I slam my finger in the car door, I scream, Vladimir Putin. If I have a stomach ache, I scream, Vladimir Putin. And that's normal. But when something good happens, I go, Barack Obama. New World Order. Thank you. Ooh, thank you. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Toll-free number 800-259-9231. UN calls emergency meeting on Ukraine crisis. Ukraine's president says Russian troops have been brought into Ukraine, calls for NATO aid, right as NATO tanks and armor show up in Ukraine. What would you do if NATO was moving troops into Ukraine and Poland right by your gas pipelines that you get all your money from? You would send in regular military. Let's see, that's why I'm a traitor. I should support the foreign banks that occupy my country, and they're going to sit this out in Switzerland or the Cayman Islands or wherever, starting a nuclear war. I mean, I'm just a bad person for not wanting a nuclear war. The Pentagon's been putting out lots of propaganda, I mean truth, about how we can survive a nuclear war, why it's like no big deal. Radiation's good for you. Just ask Ann Coulter. Russian and Ukrainian troops battle in the south, prompting fears that invasion has begun. This is not confirmed, but the Washington Post goes with the headline that Russian and Ukrainian troops are battling in southeast Ukraine with no evidence of it. They've put out some satellite photos. You know, I guess we got photos from the Gulf of Tonkin, too, that the Vietnamese attacked our ships. And the next time I'm going to hear, what are you, for commies? Oh, yeah, I'm a big commie. That's right. No, I don't want nuclear war. I don't want to start fraudulent wars. Our global elite, that just 40-something years before the Gulf of Tonkin had put Lenin, V.I. Lenin, in charge of Russia, owned and ran Ford and General Motors plants, the biggest in the world, in Russia, producing hundreds of thousands of trucks a year for the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and missile launchers and tanks and weapons and SAM missiles. U.S. and globalist-owned factories all over Russia building the whole thing from 1917 right through World War II. And then suddenly, oh, we have a commie scare, so we have to take your rights to fight Stalin, while the factories and Arm & Hammer and Al Gore's dad, Senator Gore, sat on the board of it, shipping, and we weren't allowed to bomb the ships by the hundreds every week coming in to Hanoi Harbor. Going in there. I'm going to give you a big secret about Richard Nixon, and I should do a special report on this sometime. Because what's old is important. What's really old news and unknown, even though it's hiding in plain view, is important. Vietnam went on from 1959 until 1975. Officially 1964 to 1975. You know, our own military generals and others kept getting removed because they wanted to bomb the North. They wanted to bomb that harbor. They wanted to mine the harbor. And no one would let them do it. Because you had all this money being made from Russia and Europe and the U.S. companies sending all the armaments in to fight our troops. A perfect globalist war where you run both sides and make money and get power out of it and then destabilize the country and create a social movement you control based on socialism as the counter to war. How do you sell socialism and collectivism and political correct? You sell it against an illegal war so that it gives it the moral high ground. See, they don't want a Ron Paul who's a libertarian against war, or the John Birch Society that was against the war and got demonized in the 60s and 70s because they tried to stop it because they had the insiders in the government that knew the truth. Oh, that's that right-wing crazy group. They're traitors that are commies. Yeah, the anti-commie group's commie because they didn't want, because they said our government's shipping all the weapons in. And then Richard Milhouse Nixon, for all his sins, he didn't get in trouble for spying on people or planning to stage a terror attack against himself to blame it on the Democrats. That's declassified. He didn't get in trouble for IRS files. He bombed the North, and he ran a bunch of different operations bombing the communists, bringing weapons in out of other countries, Cambodia. And when he sent in B-52s to bomb the North, the impeachment process began. You understand that? And as soon as our military, it took them years to figure it out, we're not allowed to take the enemy out, the war ended because the morale ended because we wouldn't keep fighting because we knew it was a fraud. That's what the Al-Qaeda war is. That's what the war on drugs is. All these are fake wars where they bring the drugs in, they bring the Al-Qaeda in, they bring in the illegals in, they bring it all in, and then watch the big fight that starts, and then they act like their savior's trying to start it, trying to stop it, when they're only trying to start the next leg of it. So that's why Nixon was removed, because he wanted to win. And I'm not lionizing Richard Milhouse Nixon. He went over and made deals with the communist Chinese who'd been put in power in '49 by his predecessors, Harry Truman. Can you believe our government and David Rockefeller, when Mao Zedong died, I think it was in '76 or '78, we've gone to the microfilm, got shots of it, it's in my film Endgame. He praised communism and bragged about why he supported putting Mao in the first place and how communism is the way to go in America. David Rockefeller in the New York Times praising the biggest mass murderer in history and saying we need communism for a community of purpose. That's a quote. And when the John Birch Society would run around freaking out about it or others, they would be called traitors by William F. Buckley and the CIA on record run National Review. Because how do you control opposition? You lead it. Well, I'm going to tell all the CIA people on the right something. You're going to be set up and brought down once the controlled left comes in. The globalists everywhere put the left in. They use the Hegelian dialectic of left-right, but in the final countdown, they will long knife every single libertarian or conservative trader that opens the gates. You're going to lose everything, fools. Oh, yeah, the CIA fat cats, so they make a bunch of money working with communist Chinese generals, using Chinese as slaves to make the cheapest goods in the world to leverage the planet and take over. And now they've done it. America's betrayed. We're deindustrialized. They told the CIA people and the technocrats, oh, we'll keep the super high-tech stuff here. We'll only give the medium tech to Japan and to China and others. They've sold all of it out, folks. MIT came out last year with DARPA and said there's no way to regain the industrial base or the high-tech base. It's been lost. The U.S. is over. And they did that to make the elite that isn't traitors give up. And they're all being told, all the billionaires, everybody, you play ball with the New World Order world government that's going to be based out of Europe. You supply military troops and robots to it, and we'll let you live. You really think an elite like that's going to let you live when they'd finally drop the hammer? Ray, Gator, Hope, Blair, we're going to you. We want to hear what you think about this situation. There's been a proxy war going on in Ukraine this whole year. Is this new provocation real? Probably not. It's a bunch of hype to escalate what? What do you do with people with nukes? What do you do the Russians pour in to take control of their area the West is trying to steal? Again, they expect Russia to stand down. Russia is not going to stand down. They're just trying to win the propaganda war right now with their own lies. I want my country back. I don't want Russians running it, and I don't want George Soros, a Nazi collaborator banker, running it. All you want to call me a traitor, some of you out there, you neocons, because I'm against nuking Russia, all because you're mad that your great-granddaddy got kicked out or your grandfather got kicked out, the entire neocon movement, founded by Trotskyites, kicked out by Stalin. You think you're going to reconquer Russia and the great dream of 1917? You got a bunch of Americans going over there in 1917, taking over Russia. Then the Russians kick out the Americans, send them back. They come over here, set up the neocon movement. And that's who runs this country, a bunch of communists. Ray in Poland, you're on the air. What is your breakdown on this?
You know, I don't really know much about everything in the situation, but I completely agree with what you're saying. And the most craziest thing that I think about here, since I've been in Poland, because I was born in California and raised in Texas, is that here in Poland is just as crazy as it is there in America, because the people here have no idea what's going on. They don't even have two thoughts towards the idea of what's happening right next door in Ukraine. I was in the Ukraine, and I lived there for a couple of months, and it's like eastern Ukraine is completely Russian, and western Ukraine is completely, it's either Ukrainian or it's Polish. And in the western part of Ukraine, there's no sense of regulation. And you can see it because in the western part of Ukraine, it's like slums, kind of. It's not really nice. The cities are kind of broken down. Buildings are very old. But as you go back towards the eastern part of Ukraine, it's really nice. The cities are very clean, very, very hospitable, very nice there. And here in Poland, the people get the same messed up news, no truth, because they get the same thing that MSNBC.
Exactly. They get German news as well. And expanding on that, for people that understand, the political class wants to take all the people's land and infrastructure who are Russian. So for the political class in the poorer western part, they want to rob the East. that has infrastructure, everything. I mean, that's what's going on here. I mean, Russia at one time had one of their capitals in what's eastern Ukraine right now. But again, we're cursed by knowing the facts. God bless you. Appreciate the call. Let's talk to Gator in North Carolina, then Hope, Blair, and others. You lived in Ukraine. What's your breakdown on this?
Yeah, some time ago, I was there professionally in the media business for a couple of years, lived in Kiev. We still have family there in eastern Ukraine, some of which have had to send their children away to safety in Russia, actually, to keep from being bombed. The consensus is among family and friends back there is a lot of people in the know and that have any kind of sense to them understand that this is all completely U.S. promulgated event. They understand that this is CIA manipulation. When I was there, I did experience firsthand encounters with the underground Nazi movement there, though. It is very prolific.
I want to hear about this. The vice president who our government put in, that Soros put in, literally Heils Hitler, for those that don't know. And these are real Nazis, folks. They worked with Hitler in World War II. We'll be right back. Stay there, Gator. And we'll go to Hope and Blair. Gator, you're saying you have family in eastern Ukraine. You've worked there. Recapping, you said they've had to send their children out of the country into Russia. For those that just joined us, they're announcing that Russia has attacked Ukraine and invaded. And they've been saying this over and over again. The truth is the West has overthrown Ukraine, is trying to take Russian infrastructure that's always been there, Russian ports, Russian pipelines. That is not an endorsement of everything Russia does to say it's wrong for us to start a war with them. Again, this is not Iraq that's being picked on by Wall Street. And by the way, it's Wall Street folks financing taking your guns. It's Wall Street creating the culture of the NSA. It's these foreign banks that have sold us that they're Americana, that run our country, that are trying to start an economic and physical war with Russia. I'm ranting. Gator, go ahead and make your point about the first-hand run-in with the neo-Nazis that run the Ukrainian government.
Yeah, it was, while there, I mean, it was, a lot of it was underground and kept underground, and obviously it's come from underground and it's running the show now, but when there, I mean, I encountered it firsthand, and having to actually intervene on the downtown street, Krishyatik in downtown Kiev in broad daylight with some guys attacking a Hasidic Jew and just broad daylight, walking up to him randomly, starting to beat him down in the street. So I had to intervene in that situation. That's when I really came to learn, start to investigate and see how prolific the Nazi movement was there. People understand who Joe Biden's son is over there. They understand what's going on with control.
Yeah, for those that don't know, he just got control of all this Russian gas that the Ukrainian government is just saying is his now. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the Ukrainian people, a lot of them, a large portion of them, especially ones we know, understand that this whole thing is engineered by the CIA and by the United States and the Britons to try to coax Russia into a war. And that basically is the bottom line. They know they're doing it. They're using the neo-Nazis to slaughter all of the people that are not loyalists to the Nazi party, to the Nazi movement, and who just want to be free and be left alone and maintain their sovereignty and their good relations with Russia. And those people have to be exterminated, kind of like all the Christians in Syria need to be exterminated.
And there's a problem because half of Ukraine or more is allied with Russia and has Russian ethnicity. This is not something that they're ever going to win. Again, what does NATO think they're going to do? Start a nuclear war with Russia?
Exactly.
I appreciate your call. God bless you. I mean, our government funded ISIS and turned them loose and is now fighting them. It's not our government. And I want to explain, the average cop, the average FBI agent, even the average person in the CIA, because I've talked to them, is completely freaked out as well. And they know the government's going for broke. The people that have hijacked our government are doing things so reckless, it's scaring everybody. Because this is how you destroy the planet. I mean, this is so reckless. And it's not a moral high ground. It's so evil. It's global domination. Messing with 170 million Russians with high-tech weapons. It's just, it's madness. We're going to go to break and come back with Blair and come back with Hope and Darius and Kevin and others. I just want to remind folks that we'll also be covering a lot of other news. Ebola outbreak is the worst than he ever feared, says the UN. We have huge news on that front, as many as 20,000 now infected. This is a big deal. We're going to be covering that. 18 signs that Obama administration is openly hostile to the military. CDC whistleblower, I knew about this a few weeks ago, but it's breaking now, has come out and said, no, they faked all the numbers on MMR. They know vaccines are hurting people. Before I end this hour, please remember we're listener-supported. You get a PrisonPlanet.tv membership, and 11 people can use it, and to see the nightly news and all my films, and support the tip of the spear in the First Amendment, PrisonPlanet.tv and InfoWarsStore.com. They have all the great vitamins and minerals, cutting-edge supplements, and InfoWarsLife.com. Please support us so we can try to get the word out. All right, my friends, thank you for joining us. We're talking about the exploding escalation, the crisis, with Merkel saying that Russia is doing things that could lead to war. Last week, 2 weeks ago, they claimed a Russian armored column got blown up. That wasn't true. Clearly, there's Russian forces in eastern Ukraine. It's been part of Russia forever. They're guarding their interests. That's just a fact. But it's being escalated as Russia's invaded. We've got to do something. We've got to have a war right now. You know, move in the NATO troops.